Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talks with Griff. Oh my goodness, today we have an amazing guest in the seat. But before I do that, y'all already know what time it is. Candle of the evening, serendipity, this candle, green notes, woody after effects, and a floral accent. Chef's kiss, oh my goodness. But the lady that we have in the seat today, a certified sex therapist, clinical psychotherapist, mental health counselor, and more. The list is endless. It actually takes up the whole page. Ladies and gentlemen, Paola Rodriguez in the seat. How are you doing, man? It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for agreeing to come on the show.
Darren, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. This conversation is going to give you guys so much knowledge. So I'm excited that you have me, and I'm ready. Let's talk about sex.
Yeah, so it's a juicy topic, right? So one of the things that we discussed beforehand was the difference between therapy and education. Can you go a little bit into that?
Sure. So I think, guys, I think first of all, education is kind of like, for me, sex education is kind of like a human right? So I think, and when it comes to education, I want us to be really mindful that the present or the current education that a lot of people are getting around sexuality is porn, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I think when it comes to education, it's just making sure not only that you understand how your anatomy works, educating yourself in understanding your body and what are the pleasurable zones, what are the things that you dislike, and also understanding that when we think about good sex education, it's not only about STIs or pregnancy, but also pleasure and consent. When it comes to therapy, I would say that sex therapy aims to help people, like, let's say that you are noticing, right, that maybe you don't really know if you've ever experienced an orgasm. If maybe you have a certain fetish, or you like something that's a little bit more kinky, but you judge yourself harshly because of it. If you're in a relationship, and this is a topic that that I really focus on because it's one of the most common topics that come in my practice, how to keep the spark in a long-term relationship. So if you're running into any blocks when it comes to sexuality, this is when it's best to come to a professional. Darren and I, had a really juicy conversation. And one of the things that I told him, I said, one of the toughest things about my job is that people wait so long to come to therapy, right? So they notice that something is up, they notice that something is wrong, but they just wait so long. And the longer that you wait, the bigger decisions can become.
Right. So you mentioned that one of the main issues is that within these not long distance relationships, long relationships, long term relationships, that the sex seems to die out, and that's one of the things that we hear a lot in society today. So we hear this thing of sexless marriages and sexless long term relationships. What do you think happens, or what disconnect happens between both parties for the sex to just die out?
Sure. Oh my God, there are so many things, right? So one, I think that, first, guys, when we think about rom-coms, movies, shows, a lot of the times what we see is that sex is supposed to be easy, connection flows and happens. We don't really get to see what happens next, right? And this is the work of Esther Perel. She talks about love and desire. So all humans want to be loved, want to be validated, want to feel secure. Routine makes you feel safe, but that in and of itself, it starts to disrupt desire, because desire wants a cross to bridge. It wants to wonder. It wants to be curious. And how can we be curious about someone that we already know so well? So one, we want to normalize that in the beginning of the relationship, we may be more willing to go in the bathroom at a store and mess around. We may be more willing to be spontaneous. We're not worried about life as much as we are as the relationship starts to move forward. For a lot of my couples, moving in is when they start to say, oh my God, now we got to talk about finances. And now I see your smelly socks on the floor. And now, I got to talk to you about who's going to take out the dog. And our mind is filled with that to-do list that starts to disrupt the spontaneity of it all.
I think that couples don't date once they get the person that they want. I think what tends to happen is because humans are lazy naturally. So when you get the person, oh, I got it, you know, it's spicy in the beginning, and then as time goes on, it's like, oh, well, I don't even want to be around you anymore. And some studies show that the reason for that is because you tend to develop more of a platonic type of relationship with your partner instead of a romantic one over time. Does
And,
that play an effect into it?
yes, yes. And also, Darian, we start to feel responsible.
Mm.
Responsibility gets in the way of playfulness. And I'm talking about responsibility from the standpoint of finances. I'm talking about responsibility from the standpoint of we got to go to your family on Sundays. Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to walk the dog? Who's going to wash the dishes? And then the biggest one, or the most common one that I see, emotional responsibility.
Mm.
If you're upset, it is my job to make it better. And how do we find a good balance, right? And if I make you mad, I blame myself and it must be my fault. And when we're afraid to hurt one another in a relationship, which I could understand the concept, right? But I think almost disappointment in relationships is inevitable, right? Like we start to distance ourselves. So I think, that romanticism takes intentionality. 80% of sexual encounters are planned or semi-planned. We plan everything else. But yet we think that sex should be natural and effortless, just like we see in the movies, right? In the movie, we see that the person is they're kissing, they're making out, and all of a sudden both of them have fireworks orgasms. Right? I have a lot of couples just like, well, how do we orgasm together? And I'm like, well, let's talk a little bit about, let's back up, right? But and all of these messages that we get implies that this should be easy, it should be natural, and it should be effortless.
And it's not. None of that is easy unless both parties have worked on themselves individually as it pertains to sex. Like, have you dabbled with your body enough to find out the that you might condone, like, just like how you said, and taking the responsibility out of it, just being present with that person and understanding that, and most people won't like this, but it's the truth. You're responsible for your own orgasm. It's not your partner's responsibility to ensure that you orgasm, which we know in society today, a man, he needs to perform. He needs to go 2 hours at a time, right? For the woman, she can't ever dry up, or she can't get tired, or she can't hold this position too well, whatever may have you. All of these expectations fall on both parties, and I think that brings a lot of stress in and outside of the bedroom. You spoke about spontaneity. Every person, and that's why it's in the movies, right? That's why it's in the movies. That's why it's in the shows, because all it takes, you and your partner, again, y'all walking. There's a bench, or there's a bridge in a park somewhere. It's summertime and she's wearing a sundress. You feeling a little brave. You feeling like, you about ready to spice things up a little bit. She won't know what's going on until it doesn't happen. And she's like, I'm gonna need you. You're gonna need more of that.
And Darren, and I almost want to repeat what you just said. Two things that you said that for me are really important. Guys, listen up. You are responsible for your own orgasm. You are responsible for your own pleasure. Please, if there's anything that you take from this talk, and you also touched on something which is so important. It is so much easier to modify and change yourself than to see what your partner is doing or not doing. So individually, what are you bringing to this relationship? Right? Because let's say that you grew up in a neglected household. Your family of origin neglected you. You didn't feel attended to, and now you're making kind of, let's go to sundress, and I'm reaching out, and she says nope or hey, right? How do I see that? Right? How do I not see rejection as, oh, I'm never going to try this again? And it's important to understand that if you've had some events, whether you talk about them being traumatic or significant, where I was rejected as a child, bullying, unattended to, that, no, is gonna feel so intense that often people go into protection mode, which is, I'm never gonna try that again. And it's not about never
Mhm.
trying that again, but it's about you running away from that feeling that's
Yes,
so familiar to your upbringing,
yes,
right?
that's so deep. That's more than an emotional wound that gets hit when, especially when it's
Yes.
someone that you care for, someone that you love, someone that you want to have sex with, and they give you that no. It's like, and it's funny because men get rejected more often as it pertains to sex inside of relationships, correct? But if a man rejects the woman, if he says, "Oh, I'm tired," or "I don't feel like doing too much today," it's like the house blows up for whatever reason. I don't understand that. I don't understand that dynamic. And then maybe it also might be because of the fact that that wound might not have been tended to. They may not have found out why that core wound. There could be codependency or a multitude of things.
Yeah, Zara. And when you talk about a wound, let guys, let's think a little bit about what that looks like. Because if I have individual wounds, right, and I just kind of put a band-aid on it, whenever it touches, right, I may need stitches, but I only put a band-aid because I haven't been willing or unable to look at my stuff. Any little look, then it's gonna open up that wound. And I would dare say, just
Mm-hmm.
from the work that I do, during that, men get rejected more often, but women hurt deeper when they do. And
Oh,
I'll tell you
yeah,
why.
yeah.
And because for men, right, like, and this is socialization, guys. For men, it's like, well, she rejected me. Oh, well, we have a higher libido. Men want it more. Maybe it's a little bit easier to explain or compartmentalize.
Mm-hmm.
When a woman gets rejected, they're like, because we've been socialized to think this way. How could you? You're a man. You're supposed to want it. And if you don't
Yes,
want it, there
something's
must be
wrong with
something
you.
wrong with you. And therefore,
Mm-hmm.
this must be something wrong with me. Right? So even though that is the case, it is important to understand, that, guys, we want to normalize rejection, because one of the things that I see, Darren, that's such a difficult dynamic to undo is when women, and sometimes, actually, I was just talking to a client earlier, and he was kind of going through something like this, where he said, Paula, I just kind of went through the motions,
Mm-hmm.
right? About women tell me this a lot, where they're like, I didn't really want to, but I don't want to hurt his feelings, and he's gonna be upset if I don't, and I'm just tired of saying no, and so I'm just gonna go through the motions. And some of my women have said, Paula, I literally felt violated by someone that I loved. And so now it's not only about something that you're bringing in individually into the relationship, but also something that's happening between the two of you, and
Mm-hmm.
that can just cause a bigger issue and a more difficult dynamic to undo.
There's a disconnect there. It's the feeling of being feeling obligated as to you having to fulfill this need. But and then on the other side of that though, which I'm sure you've got this question as well, some people might say, okay, well, why did you get into a relationship anyway? Why did you get married anyway if you didn't know that this was, let's say, a part of the curriculum, if you will? Now, that may come a little later down the line, but before that happens, I think that why both parties are disconnected needs to be discussed. Something isn't clicking. Maybe it's something you're doing unconsciously. Maybe it's something that happened a month ago that somebody isn't talking about, or maybe they've just been fantasizing about other people for this period of time. They don't find you attractive as of right now.
Yes. And I think I want to go back to something that you said, because I think it's important to highlight.
Mm-hmm.
Obligation does not elicit desire,
Okay.
right? Obligation, and then it's really interesting that you say that, because I think, and I see this, I'm in Miami, so I'm lucky that I work with so many different cultures, which I
Mm-hmm.
love, right? And one of the things that shows up a lot is kind of like what you said. Well, we're married, and because we're married, this is part of being married,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it is so important to kind of challenge what that means. And I think, yeah, I would say, man, it's tough, right? Because then we're kind of fighting two competing forces. Why did I get married to begin with? Yet right? Like sometimes we work from this cookie cutter approach, and I'm seeing that come back with a vengeance with our younger generation, Darren, which is like you meet somebody, you start dating, you get a dog, somebody moves in, we get married, we get the house. You know, it's so like this. So, how many
Mhm.
people ask themselves that question? How many people understand what actually marriage entails?
That part, the
Right? And how many
responsibility.
people, yeah, and how many people can normalize that maybe at some point in our marriage a therapist or a provider is gonna be part of one of our seasons,
Mhm.
right? We believe in preventative care when it comes to physical, but we don't believe in preventative care when it comes to mental
Or emotional. Thank you.
or
See,
emotional.
yeah, damn, yes. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. That,
So
yes, yes.
so it's so crazy, right? Like we go to the gym, we do preventative care when it comes to the body, but the most important part of your life is the mind and how we move through the world thinking the way that we do.
What are some of the ways you coach your clients through that process, through that season? People who are married and people who are not married, I'm sure you've had both people come to you, married couples and single people, about their sex life as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mm.
People that are engaged, people that are dating, people that are married. Yes. All of the above. Right. And I think, normalizing that at some point we're gonna struggle. I prefer, and it's just better prognosis overall, when a couple comes in and they don't say is therapy or else. Because when
Mm.
I run into is therapy or else, it's kind of like you come into the ER, I'm jump starting your heart and hoping that you survive.
Mm.
And one person may have a foot out the door. But yes, I think all types of couples, come in. And I would just say when you start to see, like, man, there's a pattern here, right? Because people can get lost in the bickering. Well, if you only took out the garbage every Friday, then we wouldn't have these arguments. It's not the garbage, it's not the kids, it's not the parents, it's the pattern that we're seeing. When you
Mm.
complain, I get angry. When you get angry, I start to detach. When you detach, I start to chase. It is the repetitive patterns that when you see that they start to show up, that's a little yellow light. Ooh, there's something here that I have to look at,
Mm.
right? People come in when they're in red, red, red. No, 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 no. If there's something that you're seeing that you're like, especially with sex, because with sex, it is one of those topics that, sex is just a different connection to every other connection that we have in our relationship. It is more
Mm.
physical. Um, and even for people that have anxious attachment, having sex with their partner makes them feel, oh, sure, okay, things are okay, we're doing well. And so with sex, guys, this is one of the things that if you're having a little bit of trouble, if you feel like you haven't connected, if you feel that you're talking about it and you're fighting about it, if you feel resentful for your partner, if you feel like you're making yourself have sex or obligating yourself to enter this space, this is when you really want to make sure that you take care of that.
Yes, I don't think any man or woman wants pity sex. There's nothing worse than pity P or pity D. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing worse because you can actually feel the images like, this ain't right at all. None of this is right. Earlier you mentioned how the porn industry affects specifically men and women to a degree. Just women aren't really talked about as much. How has that affected society today as it relates to sex and how we view sex?
So I actually wrote some. So okay, so some of the things that we see in porn. So just a couple of statistics, guys. Nearly one third of pornography clips have physical acts of aggression. Women are targeted 94% of the time. Nearly 40% of teens has seen internet porn by age 14. 80% did not intend to. And what happens with porn? Two things, guys. So for men, we see the hour erection,
Mm-hmm.
oversized penis. Um, Everybody says yes. There's no negotiation, no lubrication, orgasms for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? Women look beautiful. They don't even right. Like there's not any sweat in there. We, for sweaty people, that in that activity we're sweaty as people.
Yes,
You're gonna see it.
definitely. Definitely.
Nobody stops for a glass of water, right?
Right.
Like, and so I think, this creates about 70% of men have worried about their penis size at some point of their lives. So, we see vulvas too. There, we see this perfect, beautiful vulvas on porn. And, I'm gonna talk about this in one of my episodes, but I got a question about vulvar rejuvenation and what I thought about it. And so, so all of these messages that this is how it should be. Orgasms. We know that only 25% of women can orgasm through penetration, right? But then when we see porn, well, why can't I be that? Why can't I orgasm like that? Right? So I think and then the most important when it comes to women's desire is that porn bypasses sensuality, anticipation, foreplay, where it comes to emotional connection, when it comes to touch. For many women, foreplay is not about in the bedroom, it's everything outside of the
It's a
bedroom.
week before.
Yes,
It's a
exactly.
week before.
Yeah.
Minimum.
So, I imagine when you were talking about the sundress and making that pass, what I want to know what was happening before that, which it's interesting because that's what we see in a movie. She's walking through Central Park with this beautiful dress. And she responds right away, and maybe 5 minutes ago they were getting into an argument. Right? We don't see that foreplay being represented enough. And in porn, that definitely doesn't happen. Another things that I see in porn is, let's say, right, like, because I'm thinking about Pornhub, which is mainstream porn. And so the person is da 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 da. And some of my guys maybe ran into like trans porn or maybe gay porn, and there was something about that aroused them. And then if you have obsessive thinking or anxiety, they come in and like, oh my God, am I gay? Do I like this? What does this mean? And so, it's just a lot coming our way. And without enough context to understand what it is that we're seeing. It's a lot.
It is a lot, and I think that it has skewed our perception on how we should be inside relationships as it pertains to sex. Like it's given us this unrealistic expectation on both men and women. I think men more so too. Like you said, you gotta have the anaconda. Your stamina you gotta be able to play like it's the fourth quarter, all four quarters. Right? You need to focus on your stamina, not bust at all. Learn to have internal orgasms from a tantric perspective. Make sure that she has 3+7 orgasms, right? And I think that tends to slow down what men are capable of naturally if they again were just more present with the person that they were with. I find it was funny because you probably see this and you probably understand. So it's on TikTok. I don't have TikTok anymore on YouTube, but someone was just walking down the street and they just randomly asked me, "Can you show me where the clitoris is?" And one man couldn't identify where it was at, and I was just like, "All right, so I see why women tend to be a little frustrated."
Yes, guys. So I actually brought Lola with me. So so we're gonna understand what the clitoris is. I'll show you in a minute, but I wanted to say something that you said, because you said something there in which porn, so we go into sex, I think I know what you want, versus let me ask you what that is. And I have great admiration, guys, for the kink community, people that practice BDSM, bondage, dominance, because there's so much negotiation. There's so much talk. Remember, you and I were talking about 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes.
That people didn't really love that. Sex therapists didn't really love that. A lot of people, because there wasn't enough consent represented. So when it comes to kink, they got it down. They know that it's like, okay, what feels good, and they're so tuned in into what their partner feels and what they want.
To each other, yes.
To each other, right? Like, is this okay? There's safe words. There is a almost like meeting. Okay, let's negotiate about what this is. And there's a post. hey, how did that feel? What did you like? What didn't you like? And there's a during. It is so well thought out. So we have a lot to learn when it comes to negotiating scenes. And guys, so this is Lola, user for a lot of the presentations that I do. You know, this is my vulva puppet, and I have full consent to use her. So remember, the clitoris, right? It is.
Pay attention, fellas and ladies.
Yes. So where the little flower is, guys, the clitoris, its only function is for pleasure.
That's wild. Like every time you have an organ, its sole purpose is to make you feel good.
That's it. Repeat that. Its only purpose is to make you feel good. It has 8,000 nerve fibers. Right? Almost double than the penis. And so I think the clitoris, you know, this is your go-to. You know, some women may have the hood. This is the hood. It may hide it a little bit more. Some of them are going to have it, you know, exposed a little bit more. So I always encourage my guys and also my women, you know, go on a clitoral expedition, right? Really understand the vulva. And remember that for the women out there, because Dora and I have women that have never taken a mirror and looked at their vulva, that are really afraid to explore, you know, and this has to do with a lot of religious messages, cultural messages, you name it, right? And so I think it is so important for them to be able to feel, because how could you tell the person what you like and you dislike? You know, clitoris can be very sensitive, right? Like, you know, there's a new thing. Somebody was telling me about this. I think it was in TikTok as well. The rose is like the new toy, right? Like, you know, but for some people, the rose does nothing. For some people, vibrations feels a little bit too much. I just met someone that does the wands, right, which they're like crystals, you know. So you got to figure out what you like, because sexual communication is such a big part of sexual health. One cannot happen without the other.
See, you brought up the expectation of both parties automatically knowing what they should do or how something should be done, right? And I think that just puts a lot of stress on both. One, nobody's talking about it, and two, I think people might find it to be a little bit weird or it might be taboo. But my perspective is like, it's not taboo for us to be here bucket naked right now. But I'm not. If I was to ask you, do you prefer a nipple orgasm or a clitoral orgasm, or do you prefer more of a cervix orgasm? That lets me know what works best for you, so that way I know what I can do to make sure that you feel good. Not saying that my sole purpose is going to be to make you orgasm, but I'm taking mental notes. That way, if we happen to be in this situation again, I'll be like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna just deal with this. This is what I know. If you tell me that you don't like this, I don't know not to do that. And from that point on, we can progress or change up the plan if needed. And you also brought up the BDSM community. What people tend to, in my assumption, I think, get wrong about that community is the fact that they focus solely on the connection within that community. There is nothing that can or cannot be done unless both parties agree on it. You know, you have the dom and the sub, you have the masochist and the sadist. You have dom women and sub men, right? Everybody is essentially playing a character. But unless there is trust between one another within that, nothing is going to happen. Just like you said, there's conversations before, during, and after. After is called, what is it?
Yeah, the after.
Aftercare. Yes.
Yes, Zara, and thank you for reminding me, because you've mentioned expectations. Oh my God, we can literally talk about expectations all day, but that is something that is so important, because when you talked a little bit about, well, shoulds, right? Like, this is the way that it should be, guys. I would encourage you to pause and ask, whose should is that? Right? Is it a should that I learned from porn? Is it a should that I learned from my dad because he was very macho and this is the way that it should be? And then nipples, right? Like, when you talked about nipples, you made me think of nipples, because nipples for women, it can be so arousing, and also for men, right? But sometimes, you know, men, even with anal play, right? Like, no, you don't go near that. No. And listen, preference, that's totally okay. But I think, even nipples, oh no, I'm a guy, I'm not supposed to. No, nipples can be very arousing. And for my gay guys out there, they're a little bit more comfortable. They know that they're like, this was great. So I think you guys don't be afraid. And to your point, Darren, trust. If you have enough trust in your partner, and in order for you to be able to do that, again, going back to the individual stuff, where does this judgment come from? Because if it's a body part that feels good, we wouldn't say the same thing if we said, oh man, when you rub my hand here, it feels really good. We wouldn't say, oh well, men and women, and I'm not supposed to feel that way. It's just a body
sensation. Part. Yes, you just feel it. It's the same when you take just a finger and you rub the inside of your palm. Right? It might not be as pleasurable as someone pleasuring your nipple, but there is a sensation that's happening there. Let's speak about stamina in regards to what can men and women do as individuals to make sure that they perform for an extended period of time. I guess more specifically men, because for those who don't know, it takes women about 25 to 45 minutes to have an orgasm. And then going back to what you said, 25% of women have had orgasms or have not had orgasms. I don't recall the stat exactly, but that's important. So what can, I guess, men do specifically to focus more on that and understanding that it's a little bit different for a woman. They're kind of like a boiling pot of water, right?
Yes. Okay. So, I'm going to break this down. So I think, thinking a little bit, okay, stamina, what does it mean for me? What is it that I'm aiming for? Because, okay, so the average time from penetration to ejaculation for men is 2 to 9 minutes, right? So, guys, a lot of people are like, yes, I'm a 2-minute man and I'm proud of it. Hey, listen. All right, but I think so. 2 to 9 minutes, the whole shebang, 15 to 45, right? So I would say, so if you want to last a little bit longer in terms of, you don't want to ejaculate as quickly, but guys, remember the whole journey, right? Because, right, like if you study her body, use sensuality, and then something that you can do just to kind of work on your stamina a little bit more. In porn, sometimes this is called edging, but sometimes I think it gives a little bit of a different meaning. But you can, kind of play with yourself, masturbate, and then when you feel that you're getting to a place where you're gonna ejaculate, breathe long enough to give you a small break, not long enough to lose your erection. And then you're at it again, right? And notice the sensations. I would prefer for you to do this without porn because I really want you to get back in touch with your sensations. And for all the guys that are listening to me, I want you to try to masturbate without porn. When I tell this to my clients, they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. This is what I'm asking you to do, because you are very sensual as well. So like your sensations, got your pleasure. So you do it once, get there, okay, breathe, pause, let yourself down. Okay, not long enough to lose your erection. Then you go a second time. On the third time, you can ejaculate. And of course, guys, what you eat is important. How much you exercise is important. And also not freaking out, because what I run into here, darn, is that a lot of my guys, I've met young guys like in their 40s already taking Viagra, right? Yes, and
that's
then
not okay. That's not okay.
And then my guys that are only like 45, 47, already getting testosterone, right? And listen, it's always good to get your testosterone checked. But just like the fear that I'm going to, right, like not be able to perform, then I got to take all these things, and then testosterone can also have other side effects, right? And then the woman, when somebody's libido is so high, then the woman starts to feel like, okay, like now I feel like I'm a little bit objectified because you always want me to have sex with you. So I think, that's a way to build stamina for women. I would say, because women can orgasm men in different ways. Some women orgasm and that's it. I'm done. Right?
Yeah, I call them sprinters or marathon runners.
Yes. And so women can orgasm and they're like, okay, I can go at it again. Right.
Mhm.
So I think knowing again, ladies, make sure that you know how to give yourself an orgasm, you know, what helps. And how do you feel bringing toys into the bedroom?
That
Right.
part.
Because
Mhm.
sometimes women, you know, they can, I was actually going to talk about this, they can give themselves an orgasm in a New York minute by themselves.
Yes.
But now a partner comes in, and what happens is, as women, especially Latinas, right? We've been socialized that we got to take care of our man, that, you know, that we got to. And so now the man comes in or the partner comes in, and this also happens in same sex relationships. And it's like, okay, but, you know, am I taking too long? Okay, I think she wants me to orgasm now. Okay, is he having a good time? And that disrupts
You're not
your
inside your body.
partner.
Yes.
And then also the guys, how do you feel when your partner wants to bring in a toy? Right?
Men's egos are fragile, especially when it comes to sex. And they say it's a one man sport, right? But dude, that helps you. You
Ex-
can. We talked about it before, right? You going out. Hey, you leaving work this Friday. I'm gonna need you to be ready around 8:15. My clothes are already laid out. I'm gonna take a shower, but I need you to put on these. I need you to put on this stone specifically. What is it? Don't worry about that. Just put this on specifically. The minute you sit down at the table, that's it. That's
yeah.
gonna be the
And I was,
longest dinner she's ever had at that table.
yes, and I think there's something about that, during that we gotta be, you know, I'm always thinking about how to help people in long-term relationships. And guys, novelty, doing something different. We're so quick to say no, I'm not gonna put that on, or why do you want me to put that on? But if we have an open partner that's willing to explore, well, let me try this out, because it will give us something to think about. What would it be like if we bring this in into our relationship? And I was thinking about toys. I was thinking, so I wanted to show you this, and you know, I'm going to do a little video about it, but I want to share it with you since I have it here. So one of the positions, and I hope that you guys can see this, that can be really intimate, and this is to find a bridge between, oh, I'm not that comfortable with you bringing a toy, and the woman feeling, oh, I'm not that comfortable with bringing in my toy. So this position can be very intimate. So you see he's behind her, and guys, if it's two women, this position may be a little bit easier. With the guys, you gotta, you know how to put your penis in the right place so it doesn't get in the way or it gets squished, right? So, you know, make sure. And then here she will bring in a toy. So have her, or she would play with the toy, reach orgasm while he is touching. So it's, I am here with you. I am also being aroused and excited by watching you self pleasure, and her being in the back and not having him look at her, because you would be surprised, during sometimes women say they're like, I make really funny faces when I come, and I make really funny noises. So it's a way for me not to have, you know, you're there and I feel you, but you're not in front of me, so I can let myself go. It will be a little bit easier for you to let yourself go, and it is a good introduction to a toy, right? Like small steps, especially if you have a lot of judgments. If you've grown up, you know, uh, we grew up with this machista culture, que yo soy el hombre, I'm the man, right? And so I think it's a good way. I was thinking about how could we bring in a position where both people are intimate, you know, but the other person feels comfortable letting go in the other person's arms.
That is a perfect way to build more intimacy within the relationship as well. You know, it lets down the walls of shame and discomfort and sometimes judgment, like especially from the man. It's like I can't compete with a machine. Of course not. It's a machine. You know, you some professionals out there might have the skills to do it, but for the average Joe that's just walking down the street, that's just walking down the street, you won't be able to do that. But that is, I think that that's powerful. It's powerful for both parties because she gets to actually be free and do it as if she was in the room alone. But having him there, feeling safe enough to even allow that, first of all, because some women are gonna go, well, just let me do this first, and you go sit over there, or try not to watch me too much. But in that book, it's actually showing that, connect first for a little bit, and then let me see what you're like in your natural state. And then over time, okay, right when she gets there, maybe she puts the toy aside, and you do what you're able to do, or you do what she likes to get her to finish.
Yes. And guys, if you haven't watched this show, Principles of Pleasure, oh my God, so good. But Dirty Lola, she's a sex educator. And one of the things that she says is that she says, remember that a toy is an enhancement, not a.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, there, it is going to help both of us. And, this idea of, yes, a vibrator is not going to do what a penis does, and that's okay. Right? Like, and sometimes even when guys masturbate, right? Like, this is the thing. Like, some men masturbate with a very tight grip and maybe really, really fast because maybe this is the way that they've learned. Just like a vagina may not, or a vulva may not do the same movement, right? So understanding that there are different types of sensations, right? And how can I feel involved in this experience with you? And as you said earlier, we have to be able to individually challenge those things. You mentioned the emotion of shame. When shame runs the show, it gets in the way for sure, 100%. And imagine, or how many of us at some point of our lives, I almost feel like we've all dealt with shame, right?
Everyone,
At some point, all of
especially
us.
with sex, everyone, yes.
Yes, because there's so many messages that sex is shameful. I work with a lot of single women, and sometimes they say, "Well, I'm gonna wait till the third date to have sex." Well, I can't give it up too quickly, and if
Mm-hmm.
they do because they felt sexual and there was this attraction and the sexual chemistry, and the guy doesn't call them, well, I should have not slept with them because I slept with them. And that's not true. There are guys, just like there's a lot of guys out there that are on dating apps, not for a real relationship. Sometimes it's just, to have sex. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the guys are even open about that, like, hey, I just want sex. But things get a little bit complicated as we go. But I think it is important to understand that. And last thing that I want to say, because you talked about this earlier, lubrication, right? So ladies, if you're not getting lubricated, right, like, I want to say that's okay, right? Like, in my office I have a whole bunch of different types of lubrication. Lube is your friend. There's water based, there is all types of lubricants, because sometimes it's the same thing as the orgasm. Oh my God, if I don't lubricate, is he gonna be upset? Is he gonna think that I don't like him? And
Mm-hmm.
then men take that very personal, right? Like,
Definitely,
if you're not
yes.
lubricated, it means that you don't want. And guys, this is arousal non-concordance, and this is a little bit of an extreme example, but I hope that you understand it by the way that I'm framing it,
Mm-hmm.
because then that would mean that kids that are sexually abused and have an orgasm or have an erection when it's happening, it means that they liked it or wanted it. No. Just
Mm-hmm.
like the other side, right? If I'm not lubricated, it doesn't mean that I don't want it. It doesn't mean that I don't like it, right? Like, there may just other things getting in the way. And to your point, when we have long-term relationships, sometimes that can happen as well. So just to make it easy, use the lubrication since the get-go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you lubricate naturally, great. That will enhance your experience. Don't get so caught up in what that means.
I also think too that just by taking some time out to get her there, I don't think men understand that the vagina is going to let you know when it's ready. It will. Now, depending on the time, obviously that depends on the woman, but the vagina is going to let you know when it's ready. Sometimes you might be ready to take action, and she might still be a little tense, right? That just maybe she's not relaxed. In most cases, that's a surefire sign that she's not relaxed. So, what can you do in this instance, right? Spend more time on her body. Appreciate her natural curves. Appreciate that she's allowed you to, well, appreciate that the both of you have this experience and you are in the presence of a beautiful woman who is about ready to, as they say, rock your socks, if you were right. Take a little bit more time to do that. There's all different kinds of erogenous zones. and you can do more with just your teeth, your tongue, and your hands. Toys also aid in that area as well.
Yes, they're music to my ears. So I want to describe, right? Like, because when we think a little bit about, imagine if we can get there, right? Darren, when you said, appreciate her natural curves, right? Like, if a
Mm.
woman feels a little bit anxious about different parts of her body, and you notice that your partner is staying and caressing that part of her body, imagine the beautiful message. So if we can almost turn this into a scene or an invitation. So he says, hey, when you come home from work, or not even, women were a little bit detailed. So you leave her a little note, you put a note on her agenda that says, like, hey, tonight at 7 p.m., reservation in our bedroom. Don't
Mm-hmm.
peek, I'll see there.
Mm-hmm.
So candles. Remember that women are very sensual. So smells. What is her favorite smell? Music. I love me some good baby making music, even though I'm not making a baby, right?
We like to practice essentially.
But I love R&B and hip hop, so that's my thing. But for anybody, whatever, and for or even that music that the spas have, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
anything instrumental music. So you set the scene, music, you dim the lights, and you get yourself a really nice oil, right? And then she comes in. I love blindfolds, especially for women, because remember that for women the main thing that gets in the way of us tuning into our body is how much we have in our mind. Guys
Mm-hmm.
too, but let's focus on women for now. And so put on blindfolds, and blindfolds are uncomfortable. They have some really cool ones online. And then you take that oil, right, and you massage your whole body except the genitals. So you go the vulva,
Mm-hmm.
around the vulva, around the lips, but you don't touch, you don't penetrate, you leave this alone. But you're just anticipation, and you do the same thing with the nipples,
Mm-hmm.
right? Around, really close to that erogenous zone without really touching, and then you do that enough, and I think the possibility of something afterwards, it's gonna, this is gonna increase your chances, right? But being patient, and Darwin, we have a whole world that's trying to pull us away from the moment, that's telling us that you gotta hurry up and get that master's, that you gotta hurry up and have kids, that you gotta hurry up and be successful, that you gotta, so many people have this goal of being a millionaire. I'm like, what does that even freaking mean? And
Mm-hmm.
when you get there, is that it? Are you happy? And
Like,
what do
what's
you have to say?
next?
Yes, it's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God, you know, so taking your time, music to my ears, I can't talk about that enough. So I leave, for some people that are listening to this, that's your little homework. Tell us how it worked. Tell us when
Take
you
your
offered
time.
that reservation in your room, what happened and what was it like for you
Yeah.
guys?
Reservation in the room. I'm gonna make a mental note for that one.
Yes.
When the time comes, I like that one. How much time we got? We have a little bit more time left, roughly 10 minutes. You said the Big Bang, right? Now, of course, we would end on this part. Squirting. Some women can, some women can't. You also mentioned, just taking the time to lead to that. For some, that's kind of tantric as well, because men, we move like, I got an erection, it's time for me to go now. However, if you learn to sit within that erection, that'll actually make you more powerful, because you can be sitting across some dinner, full blown, bricked up, but you're like, I like the polarity of this. Even though I want to ravish it right now in this moment, I just want to take some time to just sit in this, right? So let's say, you made your reservation, it's been about 30, 45 minutes, you just wrote it down, right? What are the chances, or are there some stats on women who can squirt, or can all women squirt?
Yeah, so listen, that is a topic that comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, uh, there's women that squirt naturally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, for guys, I would encourage, for people, for the women that are natural squirters, let your partner know, because sometimes it happens and it could be very hot, but it also feels like the penis is being pushed away. So we were like, whoa, what just happened? right? Some women can squirt given the right stimulation, but I would say that not all women can squirt. Some sex educators sometimes teach classes. This is how you can make your woman squirt. But I think, with squirting, this is a couple of things that happen. So one, uh, sometimes people are afraid, right? Because this is where I'm thinking, like, okay, can some women squirt, but sometimes they feel afraid because you may have a similar sensation as if you were peeing. So then you get afraid, oh my God, am I gonna pee? And then that
Yes.
disrupts your, yes.
Mm.
So ladies, if you ever feel the sensation, go with it. Go with it. And because there's been a lot of research when it comes to pee, and it's not pee, and a little bit's not going to kill anybody, but I just want to say that the research that we've done around this, there is no really any fluid that is like or smells like pee or anything along those lines.
Mm.
So for the ladies that you feel like, oh my God, this feels a little bit intense and I want to let yourself go, do it, right? Like, and if I would
Blocking the
say that
blessings.
yes, and as a partner, if you're like, oh, I heard this thing and this is how it can make you squirt,
Mm.
try it out. But I would say don't come at it with such a goal, because when
Yes,
we're
yes.
that goal thing, it's just not fun.
It
Same
seemed
thing
like
with
a
the
task.
G-spot. Yeah, same thing with the G spot. It's like I gotta find the G spot, and when they do research around the G spot, and I really like this, that they said, listen, it's a spot that's gonna feel a little bit more intense than other spots, and really what they say, right? Like, so they talk about almost like they come here, right?
Mm.
Because if you think about it, when you press this little sponge back here, you're also pressing on the clitoris.
Mm.
So it kind of goes back to the same thing that we've been talking about. Doggy style is a good, um, it's a good, it's a good position. I think it's doggy style, yes, or for a woman that's trying to do it on her own, right? Like her legs over here, almost as if you were going down. So legs over here, and then that curve motion, and it's almost like I'm here. There's toys that are gonna help you find it a little bit easier, but don't get so caught up in the goal. But
Mm.
to answer your question, Darren, I would say, like, no, women are kind of made different, and not all women can. Some
Mm.
women are supernatural, and some women with the right stimulation and being able to let go, work through those blocks, they are able to.
Yes, yeah, that's one of the conversations that I've had throughout my time being on the panel. Just just random conversations as it pertains to sex. And I think again, going back to what we discussed about the porn industry, a lot of women see that as well. They're like, "Oh, that probably feels amazing," and then I'll usually ask, "Well, have you explored yourself?" But what do you mean explored? Like, do you even know the anatomy of what you have? Have you tested it out to see if you're able to do that, right? And again, that went back to what you said earlier about some women being shameful of how their vulva looks based on what they've seen outside of themselves, right? So that's interesting to know. So not all women can. And just like how you said, just based on what I've read in some videos I've watched, some educators or experts who say that all women can. Would you say that's not the
Yes,
case? And
I know.
I
I
like
hear
that.
that too. I hear that too. And I don't, maybe I don't love that. I don't love that message, even though, listen, I want to be really respectful for the people that do a lot of research around this topic.
Mm.
Because then, if you can't, then I don't know, you will get the message that something is wrong with you. Right? I have a friend of mine, her and her husband, they've been swingers for a really long time, and they've been with many partners. And she said, I've never squirted in my life. But this one guy, this one time, I don't know what he did, but I was able to. And it was just been with that one person. So I think, I'm kind of like in the middle, because I think what we say, well, all people can, all people do, then that would mean that we're all kind of, I don't know, built the same. So and maybe I need to talk a little bit more with my sex educator friends who are also amazing.
Mm.
But when it comes to the sex therapy field, we kind of lean toward, women are made differently, and our
Mm.
anatomy is a little bit different, and everybody kind of, is created differently. And so you may always, sometimes, or almost never to never.
Mm. Thank you, Paola. This was amazing. We actually hit everything. We hit
Yay!
everything. Yeah, I love it, and I'm glad you actually asked questions as well and hit on points because I learned a lot even outside of just studying and learning things on my own. But I'm pretty sure that the audience got something from this as well. Where can the people find you? And what's last one last piece of advice that you would give people about sex therapy, and sex education?
Ah, oh my God, what can I say? I can say so many things, guys, that just, if anything, especially how things are, everything that's happening around us in the world all the time, the best gift that you can give yourself, your partner, your sexual being is to be present, to slow yourself down, to tell yourself that sexuality is an important part of who you are, right? Like, and that starts with making time for self pleasure and masturbation and exploration. So if I can, right, like, before we can think that sex is important with a partner, you got to make it super important for yourself, right? And make sure that you give yourself permission as part of self-care. Close the door on all the things that are going on just for that time. Say
Mm,
no and prioritize self-pleasure for yourself. And the other thing, what you said, during which I want to repeat again because this is important, you are responsible for your own pleasure, you are responsible for your own orgasm.
mm,
Where people can find me, so my website is Life Discovery Psych. This is where you can look a little bit about the work that I do with my individual and my couples. I created a YouTube channel called Sessions with Paola. My Instagram is also under that name, Sessions with Paola. And I use this channel to provide sex education. I want to create a bridge between sex educator and sex therapist, right? Because I want to kind of send this message that there's no one way to look at sex. It's kind of like an artist, right? Like, you tell an artist, okay, make me that same painting. It's not gonna
yeah,
happen,
it's not
right?
gonna
Like,
happen.
sex
Yeah.
is an art. And so you can find me there. And if you have any questions, please send them to me because I make sure that I answer them on the episodes as well.
Thank you, Paula. This has been beautiful.
All
Ladies
right.
and gentlemen, Paula Rodriguez. I'm going to catch y'all later on the next one.